The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is a game that takes up as much space in your heart as it does in the title of this video. Hey, 38% isn't bad. Before this, I'd never played a Zelda game, and the only time I'd ever interacted with the franchise was playing as Ganondorf. He'll never be better than my boy Marth, though. So with my first foray into the series, I really didn't know too much about what to expect. I will say that modern gaming has impacted how I look at certain games, but I'll get into that a little later. First, let's talk about the gameplay. It's split into two different categories, regular old Link and Okami. Let's start with the Okami aspect because I think that there's less there. So you get all the good doggy staples here. You get a dedicated dig button to get through terrain, or to get some nice shiny jewels. You get an enhanced senses mode that you use to fight certain enemies and track smells, but you never actually get to track any food down, which is kinda disappointing. You also get this special move with Midna, this annoying little dust mite that follows you around, where you can insta-kill anything in this circle. That's it. You can't wag your tail on command, you can't roll over on the ground, but you can do sick backflips and howl musically through a hole in a rock, so that's pretty cool. On the regular side of things, you got swords, you got shields, you got items on items on items. You get a grappling hook, a fishing pole, a slingshot that becomes obsolete in the first 3 hours of the game, a ball and chain, 2 grappling hooks. You even get a Beyblade. And jars that you can fill and fill and fill to your heart's content because this game loves nature and recycling. You can tell that it loves nature because this game allows you to practice forest and brush maintenance, and I gotta say, I never thought that a game would make that type of manual labor fun, but Nintendo did it again. In fact, there's a lot of different things that Nintendo put in this game that really shows that they were trying to go the extra mile because they were highly unnecessary. There's a bunch of one-time events or mini-games where you have to do something that is never brought up again. For example, early in the game, there's a goat herding minigame that doesn't matter in the slightest. There's a snowboarding sequence that you only need to do once, but you get to do some sick moves, bruh. So I can see why they put that in the game, even though it controls like a drunk man falling down the stairs. Same goes for the boat ride minigame, but we don't really need to talk about that. Now on to the combat. It's similar in both forms, but the less hairy Link has way more moves and combos at his disposal. Something that's really cool that I didn't even notice until I was really deep in my playthrough was that doing directional inputs, so up, down, left, right, while attacking, gives different attack patterns, and there's still way more gameplay and combat to talk about. You can use some of those items I mentioned earlier in combat, and some of them are really helpful, like the grappling hook to take off the armor of certain enemies. This is an adventure game through and through, and it's been a long time since I played one, and even still, I don't think I've ever played a game like this one. This is a very context-sensitive game, which means you better be paying attention, or you're not gonna know what you're doing. For me, that's awesome and terrible at the same time. So it's awesome because it makes you feel more engaged with what's going on. When characters talk about where to go or what to do, it's important because even when you do get a marker on the map to guide you, it's still not always going to be as straightforward as going there to do a thing. On the other hand, there's aspects of the game that feel restrictive as to how you can solve them. So let's take a look back at the beginning with that snowboarding part. Sick moves, bruh. You see this big Yeti smack this tree, this piece of ice falls and he gets on and slides down. Cool. When it's your turn, you might think, oh, I can knock this down with an arrow. Okay, maybe I need a bomb arrow since it's strong. Huh? Oh, okay. Maybe I should use this sword crafted by the gods that was bestowed upon me after an arduous task? Nope. Nope. Okay, well, what if I just roll into it and hit the tree with my head? Oh, okay. I see what time this game is on. Now, in other aspects of the game, you can solve certain problems in whatever way you want to. It's not completely free, but if you want to use a different item that accomplishes the same task, like killing an enemy, you can do that. I'm more upset that you have to roll into things with Link's hard-ass head, but that's really only because I know I've put him through a lot in this game already, since the best way to get around is to do judo rolls everywhere. Yeah, sure, you have a horse, and when you can flip-flop back to being a wolf, you can run that way too. But nothing beats rolling across Hyrule. Alright, now let's talk about dungeons, bosses, and other little odds and ends. First dungeon, the Forest Temple. I think it's a great introduction to the formula of solving puzzles with items. You get the first boss.
What you doing out here with all this ass?
And it's easy enough, even though this was where I got stuck because I couldn't figure out how to blow this rock up in time. Second dungeon, the Goron Mines. Really slow because of the boots, but not too bad or really that interesting to me. There's lava, it's hot, there's 2 bosses here technically, but I like the Flame King the most. Really all I can say. Third dungeon, the Lake Bed Temple. Okay, so I had always heard that water temples in Zelda are annoying or difficult, and initially I agreed because I walked off the edge here thinking that I would jump on the pulley thing, and nothing happened. So I was like, okay, this isn't what I'm supposed to do. But then after wandering around for like 45 minutes, I tried again, it worked, and this is where I want to talk about where some of the difficulty of this game comes from. When I played through the game, a lot of the difficulty came from me either not knowing what I was doing, so that's on me, or it came from some jankiness of the platforming, which I don't think is very good in this game. I already mentioned this with the snowboarding and boat parts, but even doing basic tasks like climbing or doing any precise movement is where the game falls apart. But at least this is a very small aspect of the game, so it's not too bad. On to the fourth dungeon, the Arbiter's Grounds. This is where you really get to test some of the skills you've learned up to this point of the game. I like the idea of switching between Wolf and regular Link, but in practice, I really don't like that you had to enter a quick 2-hit combo and then wait 2 seconds before you could do anything else with it. I did get used to it by the end of the game, still don't like it though. I know that this game uses every button on the controller, but like if I just had to hit 2 of them together to change and it was almost instant, then that would have made this way better. This is also where you get the Beyblade, so it's the best dungeon by far. Okay, 5th dungeon, Snow Peak Ruins. This is like an extension of the Arbiter's Grounds because you have to switch forms and the slower aspects of the gameplay, but I enjoyed Arbiter's Grounds way more than this. 1, because this dude just hits me to take the food without asking, which is rude. And 2, I can't think of a more damn bitch you live like this type of situation except maybe for Link himself, because Link doesn't even have a bed in his house, which is really weird, and I spent like 10 minutes trying to find it, so bro is just sleeping on the floor, I guess. 6th and worst dungeon, Temple of Time. Now the dungeon itself isn't that bad. It introduces an item that's cool but doesn't really get used, and it's not overly long. I'm just mad that I had to run through it twice because I thought that the statue guy was just gonna pop out of this thing after everything. I didn't know I was going to have to bring him with me, so I'm bitter and I hate it. 7th dungeon, City in the Sky. This one felt like an extension of the first dungeon, honestly. Part of that is just the reliance on the wind theme, but also just because it's pretty straightforward. They do have the penis pods from Man of Steel though, 5 years prior, which is interesting. Aside from that, nothing to stand out, but you do get to fight a dragon, and you can't have a bad time when you're fighting a dragon. If you are, you're doing it wrong. 8th dungeon, Palace of Twilight. Awesome name, mediocre dungeon. This whole place is a whirlwind of emotions for me because on the one hand, it has the worst boss fight with Zant teleporting everywhere, and on the other hand, it has the best boss fight where you fight Zant in every other dungeon up until that point like a boss rush, and I love me a boss rush. But again, Zant, the main bad guy of the game who, before this, was kinda cool and intimidating, turns into the most lame villain possible just to make way for Ganondorf. Then you have the dungeon itself. It has this terrible fog that turns you into a wolf gimmick that I hate, and the hand from Mario 64 tries to take your magical light ball, gotcha bitch, the entire time. Leave me alone! But again, on the other hand, you get to fight the best enemies in the game again, these birds who make this sound every time you kill them. Isn't that great? You also get to hear these guys moan harmonically. So now you see why I'm so conflicted about this dungeon now. And finally, the 9th and final dungeon, Hyrule Castle. At this point of the game, I didn't care, and I just wanted to fight Ganondorf, and while all 4 of his phases are, how should I put this? Interesting, but not fun to play? Yeah, that works. This whole last hour to hour and a half was really only cool because we got to see Ganondorf talk, and dude is a straight G. His introduction is just him sitting on the throne saying, you see all this? The castle, the land, all that's mine now. It's inspiring the confidence that this man has. If the game started here, Ganondorf beats you and you have to make your way back to the castle, this game would have been amazing, but it doesn't, so it's a little disappointing. But this game has character and has a lot of characters, so let's start with the former. The game really takes its time to establish the world and the characters in it. Even characters that do nothing and mean nothing have something quirky or interesting about them. Usually. The different sections of the world that the characters inhabit is also really interesting because it reflects the characters in some way. The game is heavy on atmosphere. Each location you go to feels distinct, and part of that is because most of them are themed, sure, but there's also a sense of you experiencing the locations differently than those that regularly occupy them, and I think that's really important in an adventure game. There's also some pretty good humor, which is hard to do in just text and facial animations, and tonally, I think the game strikes a balance even though the midway tonal shift is nuts and comes out of nowhere, but as the game progresses, it does level itself out pretty well. Now, onto the characters themselves, and there's a lot of them. There's a townsfolk of Ordon, or Orden, I don't know. Everyone is nice and it feels like the community really cares for each other, even though nobody leaves to find their kids after they disappear. And they let Link live in a house with no bed, which seems more like a punishment than anything else. Then there's the kids, Malo, whose name I only know because his face is noteworthy. He's a little dickhead, and he's a business owner at the young age of whatever he is. The other kids are boring and I don't care.
Moving on!
This guy, whose name I also don't know, but I thought he looked like Handsome Squidward, so that's his name to me. Also is boring, but he gives me my first sword and he helps at the end, kinda, so that's cool I guess. Telma, whose thangs be thangin', is nice. She's helpful. I wish her place wasn't a completely different place that needed to load in the castle town, but not every game can be Yakuza 6 or Kiwami 2. Go figure. Zelda is in the game for like 20 minutes max. Not much to say about her. Seems nice though. Renato, seems nice, also kinda seems like a stereotype, not sure, much to think about with him. The Gorons, my type of people, solving problems with intense displays of strength, 10 out of 10. The Zora, nice fish people. Now, you might think it's racist to generalize those groups as a whole instead of going through each individual, and to that I say, wait, why did I bring up a criticism that nobody even made yet? Why am I making this harder for me?
Moving on!
There's these two clown guys in Lake Hylia, and I hate them, and even though they're clowns and they choose to dress like this, they seem nice enough. Now we're at my 3 favorite characters, starting with Postman. This guy doesn't even have a real name. We only know him by his profession, and I think that shows his dedication to his craft. He's the type of man, nay, he's the type of person we should all strive to be like. My second favorite character is actually a character that I hated until the last hour, and that's Midna. I'm not the type of person to like characters who are rude to people that they don't know. I'm all for being rude to your friends, respectfully, but never to strangers, and that was Midna's MO the whole game. She even said she didn't think that the Yeti family would have a nice house like they do. Rude. But at the end of the game, she opens up and we see more of her soft side, and nah, none of that mattered to me. She became a baddie. And this was the moment when I figured out that I really am a superficial person, because all those negative thoughts I had about her were gone when she turned around looking like a low-carb snack. And this is my last favorite character, for reasons I will not discuss. Now, if you're familiar with the game, you might have noticed that I didn't bring up Ilya, who is a very key part of the game, and that's because she doesn't do anything but have amnesia for the whole game. And then when she doesn't, you never have to see her again. Kinda boring. Now, for the actual story, I won't get into specifics, but I will be specifically talking about specific moments that I think are significant in a very specific way. Got it? Great. I thought that it was fine. Aside from the bigger aspects of it, like what was going on with Zelda, who Zant was, and why all this was happening, I did not care about any of the characters. Sure, they seemed nice, and some of them had a purpose, but I wasn't really attached to any of them like that at all. I also think that with straight-up adventure games like this, it's more about you and your journey than anything else. The story is really only just there to give you the bare minimum of agency, and then the gameplay should carry it forward, and I think that this game does that extremely well. I do think that they front-loaded the game a little too much, and with the way it ends, I feel like it's a massively missed opportunity. Instead of you having to find the secret town or recover Ilya's memory, I feel like that could have been left to do after, saving the kingdom. It all felt like padding, and I think moving that stuff outside of the main story and make some type of epilogue would have made this a much better experience. But even during aspects of the game where I wasn't having fun, either through me not knowing what to do or some of the controls not doing what I want, which was a big pain in the beginning because the controls are inverted and there's no way to change that, I still felt compelled to keep going because I wanted to see what was coming next. But it doesn't matter what's coming up next because you can pick up cats and dogs in this game and carry them around. Who cares if the world is coming to an end? You can play fetch. Now I want to talk about something that I mentioned earlier. I said that modern gaming has impacted the way that I look at games, and I even name dropped some recent Yakuza games, surprise, surprise. But having to load some of these areas when you have to backtrack, or quality of life changes that I've been accustomed to, like not only having just 3 camera distances, the stratosphere, better, but still not ideal, and inside Link was kind of annoying to reacclimate to. Also, I really hate that the controls are inverted. This was a problem for like several hours. Stupid! I do think that this game still holds up exceedingly well, but there's still some issues. Also, this game doesn't actually look this good. It looks like this because I put some HD textures on my totally legal copy of the game. Nintendo, please. There's also 2 more things that I want to talk about. This game's fascination with ugly things and the music. Let's start with the latter this time. It's a Nintendo game, so yeah, of course the instrumentals are gonna be bangers, but I just wanted to mention a couple of my favorites. Pretty much any of the wolf howling songs are great. I really like the theme that plays whenever you're in a place covered in twilight, and the sacred forest beat, a masterpiece. It's also cool that when you get close to this little turd, the song changes a little bit, like he's playing the song, and that's just so special. And finally, this game really likes ugly things. So aside from Link,
Motherfucker's so pretty!
Zelda, Midna, hey girl, and a few others, everyone is ugly. Just terrible to look at, and that extends to some of the enemies and bosses. Like, why does this game need 3 different variants of spiders, and why would I ever have to fight a thing that looks like this? Even Link is looking at this thing like, ew, what is this? But he does warm up to her later, so looks aren't everything, I guess. Unless we're talking about Midna. Well, that's it for my adventure with Link, or as Link, whatever. I really did enjoy my time, and the small little issues that I had really didn't affect that enjoyment too much. There's still a lot that I can do in the game, and I'm going to continue playing, but this experience really made me want to check out some of the other adventures that Link has had. Let me know what you think. What's your favorite game in the series? Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.